Cuba, the freedom of expression.
We grow up in such a sheltered world, where the filters on our mouths are about as thin and useless as toilet paper. But in other places of the world, such as Cuba, their mouths are bound, taped, and gagged. If I were to suggest something minorly against the Cuban government, I would be thrown in prison, along with journalists and protest leaders, subject to beatings and attacks by the officials and the inmates. The reason for this intense reaction is the fact that the Cuban government is very restricting when it comes to Article 19 of the Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression.
Nobody likes being criticized, but most people wouldn't go so far as to throw their critics in prison for life. But in Cuba, there is a different story. If there is any opinion with even the slightest hint of resentment against the authorities, or even just disagreeing with one of their beliefs, then the person who said or wrote it would be presumably in severe danger of being tracked down and arrested.
In 1995, a United Nations report on human rights explains that
since the publication of the last report, there has been no change in the practice of the authorities in this regard or in the constitutional and penal provisions on which this practice is based. Persons who peacefully manifest their disagreement with government policy, either as individuals or in groups which have sprung up spontaneously to defend human rights, including trade union rights, or who engage in political activity, continue to be subject to harassment, accusations, disciplinary measures, and prison sentences.
People in Cuba also live in fear in the current day and are mostly afraid to open up about the government. When a group of human rights students went to visit Cuba to study human rights violations, they didn't really feel in danger until their Cuban taxi driver balked at taking them home after learning they were researching free speech issues. With a little extra money, they got home dropped off inconspicuously to protect their driver. After this, they started to feel like they were at a huge risk by doing what they were doing. And these students were correct. The Cuban government will censor anything against what they say is the truth and will instantly throw them in prison, despite the importance of this right in a stable country.
The right to freedom of opinion and expression has always been a valuable right in the minds of the common people. And in Cuba, almost anyone who does not belong to the government wishes for this right to become fully theirs to have. However, the modern Cuban government has never granted their people this right in fear of being overthrown by the knowledge that people could gain subsequently.
The government violates the right to freedom of expression by censoring the internet and throwing anyone who could speak out to the public into jail, influencing journalists, prisoners, the Cuban people, and the Cuban activists.
Cuba was originally a colony of Spain, but it escaped Spanish rule in the 19th century. They gained independence in 1902, creating a democratic government. However, after an election was canceled, Fidel Castro's rebel group overthrew the government, once again sending the country into a tyrannical reign.
And more recently, the freedom of speech has become even more prominent to the nation, spurring the government into action.
In 2003, the government developed new laws
to allow for the people to be censored and suppressed without the government breaking the law. Cuba has the second largest journalist prison in the world. Criticism of government officials or programs. Public debate of issues considered sensitive were limited. Not only does Cuba have these issues, they have publicly rejected the UN suggestion guaranteeing freedom of speech and peaceful assembly, as well as the free activity of human rights defenders, independent journalists, and those in opposition to the government. This proves that they aren't even looking to improve, even when publicly accused of denying this right of freedom of expression to the people. How much of their rights they were.
In the beginning of the tyrannical reign,
people were unaware of, and people were becoming more and more aware of the problem. The United Nations, as well as the USA, have been trying to give these people the rights they deserve. For example, the program USAID supports independent civic, social, and development activities by providing technical and material assistance to organize, train, and energize small groups of people within Cuba's communities. Activists have also risen up within the Cuban community, alerting the public and international agencies to the problem as a call to action. The rebel groups of Cuba have been going to the news and international reporters explaining firsthand what they are going through and allowing for more knowledge and publicity on the subject. In America, the First Amendment
Many countries have risen to address the right to freedom of expression
and have been extremely successful.
It prohibits the making of any law impeding the free exercise of religion, speech, press, to assemble, or petitioning.
It made sure that people would not be oppressed by the government by prohibiting the making of laws that would remove this freedom from the hands of the people. Human rights had all of Europe sign a document protecting the natural human rights for the people.
This included a line that states, "Everyone has the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information and ideas without interference by public authority and regardless of frontiers."
Both of these examples show great countries who have a support system built in to protect their people if it ever happened that the government became corrupt.
Cuba may not have the option of just jumping straight into a democracy with a fair and just constitution and support of everyone, but it can take small steps that could lead to that destination.
Democracy would be a great option for Cuba, allowing for it to have a base to lean on as it built itself up. A democracy would also allow for Cuba to have better support by the people, which would allow for better growth, economy, population, and general success and happiness. Nothing is ever perfect. However, slowly building up a country to democracy is a big step forward in improving the Cuban state. Cuba could grow into a flourishing country if it could give the Cuban people the right to freedom of opinion and expression. And in fact, it is not too difficult to take the first steps toward a changed nation.
The first step towards a well-balanced nation would be to release the journalists and bloggers so that they may spread awareness, maybe allowing for people to think of solutions that would help both parties.
This would be simple because all it would take is their releasing and not capturing any more of them, both of which are completely under the government's control. A free nation. This would be simple because it doesn't include thinking of multiple solutions by yourself, and instead Cuba could take ideas from other countries that would cause a happier and more prosperous nation.
The third and final step is to create a sort of version of a Bill of Rights, because it would prevent from a dictatorship from happening again and allow for people to become protected and happier.
This step would take the longest, but I believe that this is possible because it has occurred in many other corrupt countries and prevailed successfully.
The future for Cuba could be looking up and bright as long as they remember to give the people the freedom of expression and continue to develop into a more and more prosperous and truthful nation. Thank you.